go. It's another episode of the Wobcast 2.0. It's Wobby with you as always. And also as always with me is my partner and co-host Gyles, adorned in purple with a swagalicious Vikings hat. But I can see he's in the office, so there's got to be a story behind that. We'll ask Gyles about that in a minute. First, let's preview this episode of the Wobcast 2.0. A lot to get to, everybody. I know it's a little bit of a downtrodden week for the Vikings faithful, coming off another home loss, this one to the Kansas City Chiefs, dropping to 1-4. The Lions win. You're looking up at a bunch of teams in the division and the conference. Is everything lost, or is there something to salvage? We're going to talk about that later on in this episode of the Wobcast 2.0. Thoughts on the loss to the Chiefs, some PFF data to sift through, Justin Jefferson to IR, a brief preview of the Bears, and then a broader discussion about the Vikings in 2023 and 2024. All of that right ahead here today on the Wobcast 2.0. To help me get through all of it, we bring in Gyles. Hey, bud, how's it going?
Hey, happy Thursday. One step closer to the best day of the week. Monday's almost here. Definitely a great day here in our world at KLC Financial. We won Best Places to Work in Minnesota, so we're doing a Spirit Week. It's Jersey Day today, so I got a lot of purple strewn throughout the office, so exciting to see a lot of patient fans still in the arena.
So KLC Financial is experiencing something, it sounds like something like homecoming week, like in high school where every day is like a themed dress-up day. Is that what you're doing? Okay.
Exactly. We've already had neon day, pajama day, the whole gamut. You've seen some different sides of people, that's for sure. You know?
I love it. Okay, what's Friday?
Friday is Bring Your Pet to Work Day. So we'll see some dogs and cats, I think, here tomorrow. We'll see how well they mix together, but...
You don't strike me as a pet at home day. Do you guys have a pet at home?
We have two cats. I should say my wife has two cats.
I knew that.
I happen to be in the same household.
No, I knew that because your cat, or both of them, have an Instagram account.
They do. They're kind of famous. They've been in Kohl's commercials and Kraft macaroni and cheese. My wife is very creative with it. We'll see if they make an appearance tomorrow. I don't know how well that'll go over, but we'll see. Excited to see some animals.
Wouldn't it be great for the gram if they were at work?
Well, this is true. I just don't know how well they would do with all the other animals, but I guess we could just let chaos ensue.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I knew that KLC was so honored, but again, congratulations to you and the crew for that. That's pretty awesome. And we encourage everyone listening to go check out KLC. If you don't know what it is, go look it up. Pretty awesome company. So, and I heard there's a Bo Jackson jersey in the house today too, huh?
There is definitely
my brother-in-law.
A Bo Jackson.
Yeah, right.
Patrick. Yeah, he's repping Bo Jackson. He's going around telling the stories. He's definitely a big advocate over there. He thinks he's the best player to ever walk the field. So it's a hot take, but he's pretty darn good.
Hey, he's one of those guys that athletically, just away from the context of their sport and their career numbers, just athletically, I mean, you'd put him up there with Deion Sanders, Ken Griffey, like guys that just transcended their period, their time in sports with their pure athletic ability. Yep. Bo Jackson totally is that.
Yeah, clearly superior. Full stop.
Yeah, Lawrence Taylor, right?
Yes.
Anyway, all right.
Yeah.
We got a lot to get to, man.
A lot to get to.
I believe you were you in the building for the Chiefs game?
I was. It was definitely an exciting game to watch outside of the end result.
I had a little soccer game, an 8-year-old soccer game to be at until like 2:30. After that, I bolted downtown, met wifey and friends at the tailgate lot. Did not go into the building, but hung out downtown during the game and after the game. So I had eyes on the TV for every snap. You were in the building for the game. I thought the energy outside, the tailgating, the pregame, like it was cool. It was really awesome. It was a late start, a 3:30, 3:25 start, so people were getting lubed up and ready to go. So how was it in the building? Did you feel like the juice was there?
That's an interesting question because I think going into the game, there was definitely some energy. I think people had ramped back up in terms of their excitement about the Minnesota Vikings. And then the moment the first play happened, it all deflated. Unfortunately, with Josh Oliver fumbling the ball, literally the first play, you could see the the defeat in people's faces around me, like, oh boy, here we go again.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, that tended to equal the result. There are obviously goods and bads with the game, which we'll get into, but people look a little deflated after that first game.
All right, well, let's get into it. The Vikings lead the league in giveaways, Gyles.
Yep.
Period. Yeah. I mean,
they're first in drives that end in an offensive turnover. They have 22% of plays that end in a turnover offensively.
Jeez.
So 1 in 5 plays, they turn it over. That's a difficult stat to swallow.
It is, and all 4 losses are in one score games. After being 11-0 last year, they got 4 losses in 1 score games this year. They lead the league in giveaways. It's tough, man. I thought that last year's mojo, if you just took that and put it into last week's game, the Vikings win that game.
Oh,
I mean, that's
absolutely.
the type of game they won last year, Gyles.
Yes.
Don't you think?
Absolutely. They were built for that last year.
Yeah, and there's just something not quite there for the Chiefs. Not
I agree.
quite.
I think the receiving weapons are not quite what you would hope them to be. Travis Kelce obviously had a little bit of an issue, but I think they're not humming yet. I mean, the season starts in November, and I think they're clearly following that model.
Yeah, so there's something missing, and it's more than just Taylor Swift, who was not in the building. So Gyles, you couldn't track her down.
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head with what it is, because if tonight the Chiefs are hosting the Broncos on Thursday Night Football, I believe Travis Kelce's on the injury report, and I'm sitting there driving, listening to the radio, thinking let's say he's out again, like he was against the Lions in week 1. I mean, who scares you? Really? Who scares you? I mean, they've got players, but every team has players. Like, who really is we got to worry about him?
We need to stop that player.
I don't think anybody.
No.
So maybe that's what's missing. I'll tell you what's not missing for Kansas City. I was impressed and have been all season with their defense.
Yeah.
It is not just like the offense is pulling the defense along. Like, the defense is good. They're making plays. They have talent. Mm-hmm. I think their defense is pretty good, actually. Now, the Vikings did a good job handling Chris Jones for the most part. And we talked a lot about him in the build-up to the game, so that was something I liked, and we'll get into that because I believe that will factor into our PFF data discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So good job against Chris Jones, and that leads to some optimism for when the Vikings face some headaches with interior defensive lines, as they had a good plan for Chris Jones and they obviously executed it. I think we'd be remiss before moving on, though, and I'd be remiss not mentioning this before handing the floor to you to give your thoughts on the game. The officiating, there were some. I think there were some bad calls there that went the Chiefs' way.
Yep.
So I would acknowledge that. But this happens in a lot of games, and if you don't play well enough to overcome a few of those types of calls, then I don't know that you deserve to win anyway. Yep. And I think getting too hung up on it is just deflecting away from some of the problems that the Vikings are inflicting upon themselves. So I want to acknowledge that, but I don't want to blame the loss on it. You know what I mean?
I could not agree more. There was actually additionally a face mask penalty on that exact play that you're referring to at the end of the game with C.J. Ham. And although that is horrible in its own right and it would have been a 15-yard penalty, I think you're absolutely correct. I don't think that you can really hang your hat on that as the reason why we lost the game. Like, we lost the game in a lot of different ways, right? And if you don't play well enough to overcome those, you don't deserve to win the game. Period. Full stop. A loss is a loss, just like a win is a win, right? Like, it happened. You're always going to face penalties that are called and penalties that are not called. It's just a matter of the game. The refs can't see every single thing that happens on the field. So, I mean, it's a matter of life.
Yeah. Right away early in the game, the Vikings, I believe, had like a 4th and 3 or 4 that they went for it. And we talked about that, Gyles, if you remember. Mm-hmm. Where there's got to be situations where you ordinarily may not go for it, but against this offense, you got to do it.
Yep.
And then there were some moments later on where they didn't do that. They kicked a 29-yard field goal. You get down close like that against this offense. I think you got to maybe think about
punching it in.
Yeah, about maybe going for it. The first field goal was a 40-yarder, and they got points on the board. It was 4th and 7 from the 22. I can kind of be okay with that. You can't be too cavalier with this. But then they were 4th and 4 from the Kansas City 11, and they kicked a 29-yard field goal, and I didn't like that. So some things to nitpick, about the game, but the turnovers are the most concerning. And then I think, and we'll get into this at the end of the episode, but holistically, big picture-wise, the mojo, the momentum, the disposition is the most concerning thing right now with some of the things that have developed with Jefferson and the overall record and what the Lions are doing and what I'm seeing for headlines and quotes. I don't love all that.
Yep.
But, from the game, anything you want to touch on before we get to the PFF stuff?
From an overall standpoint, to put it simply, I thought the Vikings looked unprepared. And I mean that in a few different facets because, for example, even at the end of the game when we were called for our delay of game penalty, T.J. Hawkinson was lined up in the wrong place. And then Kirk was like, come on. And then obviously we got the penalty. That happened actually several times throughout the game where I'm like, man, you can't be doing that, right?
Yeah.
So we looked a little bit unprepared from that standpoint. But also, I don't know exactly the best way to put this, but I think we didn't know how to correctly apply a sense of urgency. And I mean that in both ways. Areas that we needed to be urgent on, we weren't. And areas that we should have slowed things down, we were too urgent. I think when it came to the call from Kevin O'Connell to challenge the play, I think even from sitting in the stands, I recognize I wouldn't have challenged that. And I think the Chiefs were quickly trying to do the next play, and he felt rushed, and he threw the challenge flag because he wasn't sure if it was or it wasn't, but he saw the next play developing, and then we lost a timeout in the third quarter. And I think that clearly had a pretty tremendous and direct impact on the fourth quarter when we could have used that timeout, right? There was a fourth down play where we called a timeout to try to get in a better position. We got to be more prepared for those things so we can conserve those timeouts for the end of the game. Had you had one or two of those timeouts, I actually think we win the game. I really do.
Yeah.
I think we were so close. I mean, to take a brief pause there, when you think about the Vikings and how many times they've turned over the ball more than any other team in the NFL by a fairly wide margin. And we have been so close to winning every game. I mean, when you turn the ball over that many times, you should think that it would be a blowout. And the fact that we've actually been able to keep them close is a testament to the Vikings. Now, that's not meant to say you can go give all those things back. You screwed up, period, full stop. You can't, you did poorly there, period. But there is something to be said about how well our team is playing outside of those things. We've just shot ourselves in the foot like we've talked about time and time again. But I think first thing from an overall standpoint, we looked unprepared. That came into the fumbles. Obviously, the first play of the game, Josh Oliver fumbled the ball. It was a great play in its entirety until the end. He turned a check down into a 16-yard gain, and then obviously, we fumbled the ball. But that's the first thing. The second thing, which I think I've been waiting to say for years and years and years and years, the Minnesota Vikings offensive line has started to finally look good.
I agree with you.
Oh, my goodness. We had a phenomenal game against the Chiefs, especially considering going up against Chris Jones, who is one of the best interior defensive tackles in the entire NFL. We held our own. We really did across all five guys. I was impressed. Color me impressed. They did a great job. I was in love with Garrett Bradbury's first full game back. I believe, we'll get into PFF grade beta, but they all did phenomenally. Yep. Excited to see that and say that for the first time in a while.
Yeah, I think you're right, Gyles, and it's too bad that sort of development happened in this game. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's part of why the game was close. But it's too bad it happened in this game because of the outcome of the game, right?
Yes.
Ironically, the game ended in a sack too, which I'm more mad at Cousins for that than anything.
Agreed.
It's like the last play of the game and you just got sacked, bro. Come on.
It's laughable. You got sacked on a Hail Mary.
I'm like, unfortunately, that kind of personifies Cousins, a little bit,
Unfortunately.
Super talented, great numbers, but just robotic and computer-like, and took a sack on a Hail Mary play. Gosh. But let's sort of transition into the PFF data here, Gyles. We do a fun thing where we guess, you have me guess top and bottom five offense, defense, and I've got my list down, my guesses down, and I truly did it off the top of my head and just, I typed them out. And I had to pause because the first four were offensive linemen. And this is not me peeking at the grades. This is me thinking back to the game, watching it. and then when I watch the game back, and I look at it from the all 22, I got Darrison, Bradbury, Cleveland, and Ingram all in there, and it's just so weird to me because I think O'Neal is in there like almost every week, and I don't have him in there this week, but I have the other 4 in there, and I'm like, wow, no Jefferson, no Cousins, no Oliver, no Hawkinson. It's 4 offensive linemen, and it's Jordan Addison, and I don't even know if I'm right. I think I am, but based on your reaction. But you gotta love it. You gotta love it if you're a Vikings fan.
Oh my gosh. I mean, we've been waiting for this for years and years and years. That's been our number one deficiency as a team, is our offensive protection. And it's finally an area where we've corrected that. So props to all the different people that have contributed to that.
So is that right? Are there 4 of them in there?
There are 4 offensive linemen in the top 5.
They should be in there. And who's the other one?
So the other one is Brian O'Neal. He had a pretty decent game, but he was not in the top 5.
Oh, no, but right. So I'm saying 4 of the top 5. So who's the 5th?
It's the guy throwing the ball, Kirk Cousins. He actually had a pretty decent statistical game. I wouldn't say it was phenomenal, but he had a decent statistical game. But he was ranked 4th across the offensive spectrum here at 77.5.
So go through the numbers quickly. How'd they grade out?
So starting at 5th would be Ed Ingram, our right guard, at a 72.5 grade. He did great in run and pass protection. Finally, what we have been waiting for since we drafted him. He is a prototypical physical right guard. He's exactly what I want physically. He just had issues when it comes to technique. And in this game, he fixed it. He fixed it big time, which got to give you a huge props, Ed. That's phenomenal. And I think maybe the introduction of Dalton Risner into the room maybe put a little bit of heat on his seat, saying, hey, get up or get out. And I think he's definitely turned things around. So if we can continue this play, I mean, maybe even Kwesi thought about this, like, hey, he just needs a little extra motivation, and this has definitely done that, because really, his mistakes, in my opinion, weren't that hard to solve. That's why I was so frustrated by Ed Ingram, and I was such a big proponent of keeping him on the field. I'm like, once you can crack this, you've got a good right guard here. So hopefully we can keep that play on the rise there. So he's done very, very well. Coming in at 4, obviously, was Kirk at a 77.5. Coming in at the 3rd was Ezra Cleveland, our left guard, coming in at a 79.1 grade. Played every snap. He did very well. He was elite in run blocking, and he was average in pass blocking. But at the end of the day, had a very, very great day. Once again, equaling a 79.1 PFF grade. And then moving on to the 2nd, in his introductory game this season, is Garrett Bradbury, coming in at 82.0 grade. Ooh. He did elite, absolutely elite in the run blocking game, and did pretty darn good in the pass blocking game as well, and came in obviously at an 82.0 grade overall. I mean, this is exactly what we wanted in this first round pick. Now that we've signed him into an extension, this is now starting to reach the elite level center play that we were hoping for in first round play. So hopefully we can keep that up because he's obviously a very vital point of this offense. And then, as always, coming in at number 1 is Christian Darrisaw at an 88.5 grade. He was the best offensive lineman in the NFL last week. Period.
Oh, really?
He did amazing. He was elite in every single category. He was the best offensive lineman according to PFF across the entire NFL.
I mean, he deserves that. He's usually up there. I'm not surprised. Gyles, I have across the interior then 75, 79, 82 for the 3 interior guys. I mean,
and Brian O'Neal had a 65.1 grade. He had a few bad snaps in the run, which is why he got dinged. But he also did very, very well. I mean, he was elite in pass blocking. Run is where he struggled.
Over the long haul, Gyles, 75, 79, 82 across the interior for the Vikings with Cousins, the weapons, if you put Jefferson in. The Vikings are going to score 25-plus points a game in that scenario. So they got to keep – if that is maintained, that is very good for this offense and for the team. So, look, I get the pessimism. I get the sky is falling. If people want to feel that way, they can feel that way, and they have a lot to point to. But this is a silver lining in the poor start so far. Is there are indications that some things are clicking here, and I definitely would credit Kevin O'Connell for that. When you are, as a team, when you have such a severe apparent mismatch like it was with Chris Jones going against the interior, and it's neutralized, or even you play better, that is not just the players. There's a scheme and a strategy there that needs to be pointed out. Or at least I can't draw it up for you and tell you what it was, but it was there. And, kudos to those coaches and the players for figuring that part of it out and playing more than well enough to put the team in a position to win.
Yep. I mean, this team is playing like a top 5 offensive line. They really are. I mean, for Darisaw, out of 72 qualified tackles, both left and right tackle, he's 4th in the NFL through 5 weeks. Brian O'Neill is 6th out of 72 qualified tackles. So we have fringe top 5 tackles. That's phenomenal. Like, that's the best in the NFL, period. When you look at the inside, Ezra Cleveland, out of 78 qualified guards for both left and right guard, Ezra Cleveland is 10th. Ed Ingram has now made his way up to 18th. Yeah. So we have top 20 interior guards.
So things are going here in the right direction finally, and it's something. It's one of the building blocks. Not just like to turn it around this season, but just when you think long term. This is a group that you can sort of have as part of what you're building. You're not looking to immediately replace any of these guys. None of them are past their prime or over the hill or anything like that. So optimistic part of a slow start for the Vikings is the performance of the offensive line, and particularly the positive development of late of the interior. So very good. Exactly. Don't like to dwell on this, so we'll move past it quickly. I didn't love the 2 top tight ends. I didn't love the running backs, so I won't be surprised if Madison's in there. Jefferson probably not going to be up there real high, and I thought my man KJ Osborne did not perform well. So I got a feeling that those are some names and positions that will be included in the bottom.
Yep, you are 110% correct. The 2 worst offensive graded players on Sunday was TJ Hawkinson and Josh Oliver. TJ Hawkinson had a 49.3 grade, and Josh Oliver had a 39.8 grade. Ironically, both of them did very, very well in pass protection. Josh Oliver did very well in run blocking. TJ Hawkinson did not. And then in the receiving game is where both of those really struggled. Obviously, with Josh Oliver with the fumble, that's going to ding you. And then TJ Hawkinson he was having a rough day receiving-wise. And for our second receiver, really, that's an issue, and that's obviously why one of the reasons we lost the game. And then Justin Jefferson came in at the 3rd worst at a 55.7 grade. Obviously, he missed a piece of the game. Also, there was a lot of penalties in there that can contribute to some of this. Hopefully an outlier. Obviously, we'll get into his IR status here in a little bit. But we have Cam Akers coming in at 4th worst at a 55.9 grade. Did very, very well in pass blocking, but when it came to run, he was having a little bit of an issue. We ended the day at a 3.9 yards per rush attempt, which is not as good as where we've been the last few days. So I think that's an issue. And then KJ Osborne was 5th worst at a 57.3 grade. Rough day all around when it came to our weapons, and that's obviously reflected in the score. Yeah,
and then adding injury to insult, Jefferson gets hurt on top of it. So I want to end on a positive. So let's switch to defense and talk bottom first. Then we'll talk about who we thought played well. I had a hard time with this on specifics. So I'm going to go with a theme. And my theme is I think we got outplayed in space. So I'm going to go on the edges of the Vikings defense to guess on the players. I know he had a sack, but I didn't love what I saw from Davenport. And then I thought Murphy wasn't good. Pace, Blackman, and I didn't know on a 5th one. So maybe another corner is in there. Maybe it's Metellus or Bynum. Not sure. But Davenport and Murphy I particularly didn't like.
Yep, you are spot on. Josh Metellus, unfortunately, was the worst graded player on Sunday at a 48.4 grade. The ironic part here is he was elite in run defense, and I mean like 80.0 grade in run defense. He was phenomenal in run. Pass rush, he had an 80.5 grade, which was phenomenal. The areas in which he struggled was coverage. When he was in coverage, he did very, very poorly. He played 31 coverage snaps and did not do well. There were some issues there. I believe he gave up 53 yards, which was like 7.6 yards per carry. So in coverage, there were some issues. So the Chiefs clearly found a way to exploit Josh Metellus. But in run and in pass rush, Josh Metellus did very, very well. And then coming in at the second worst was Marcus Davenport, like you mentioned, at a 49.7 grade. And across the board, he struggled. He did have one sack, but across the board, he was struggling. So that's definitely an issue. And then a guy that I think is maybe eligible to be benched if this performance does not turn itself around is Byron Murphy Jr. I was really excited about him coming into this season, but every single game he has performed very poorly. And on Sunday, he had a 50.0 grade and struggled everywhere. In every single regard, he struggled. In tackling, he was at a 27.2 grade. So there's some issues when it comes to that left cornerback position.
Yep. So this is concerning, Gyles, because we just talked about how we think something is missing from the Chiefs. Right? Mm-hmm. And we identified that as being their weapons on the outside. Who scares you other than Travis Kelce? And here we're talking about a couple of Vikings defenders who got outplayed by these guys who we say are the missing piece. Very concerning, I think. What about a guy who I like, but I don't think he played well either? And maybe you mentioned him already and I spaced it, but did you mention Mekhi Blackmon?
Mekhi Blackmon was the sixth worst graded player. He did give up, I believe, 51 yards, which averaged for about 17 yards per reception. That was a rough day. He ended the day at a 54.0 coverage grade, so definitely a rough game for him. Played 46 snaps and 33 in coverage, so definitely some issues on that side as well. He was our backup right cornerback, but still definitely some poor coverage there.
Yep. All right. All right. Positive.
Give me your top. What do you think?
I think my guy Jordan Hicks played well. I think Harrison Smith played well. And I liked Danielle Hunter. I thought he was disruptive, and I know he had a sack, but I thought he was neutral or winning a lot of battles. So those are the three I wrote down. Outside of that, I didn't have a lot to get to, but I smiled because I think Hicks is up there, and I like him. I like him as part of this defense. I think he's a culture guy. I think he's a glue guy. So I like it when guys like that play well.
Yep, you are 110% correct. Jordan Hicks was the best defensive player on the field, according to PFF, with a 90.3 grade. He was phenomenal in the run game. He had a 90.9 grade in the run. He did very well in coverage. I would say he was average, maybe a little below average in pass rush. And then he was a great tackler. So he had a great day. Nice. My goodness. He had a phenomenal day. So really excited to see that. And then coming in at 5, only had 2 snaps. So a little bit skewed here was Troy Dye. So if we move him outside, Harrison Smith was the 5th best graded player with a 62.6 grade. So he did struggle a little bit in coverage. So clearly the safety room had some issues here, but was pretty decent in all the other categories. So he was pretty good. And then Dean Lowry had another decent day. I wouldn't say it was phenomenal. Really? He came in at 3rd at a 66.2 grade. Ironically, I was there with a Chiefs fan that we were taking from a client. Chuck runs essentially movie theater projectors, and he's a big Chiefs fan, flew in for the game. And I leaned over to him because we saw Dean Lowry on the screen, and I'm like, honestly, I think that's maybe one of the worst defensive tackles in the NFL, so that's going to be a way to exploit us. And he performed pretty well.
He played well. Okay.
Yeah, so I was definitely shocked there. So he came in at a 66.2 grade, which isn't standout, but was decent. So excited to see that. And then a guy that I've been definitely rooting for came in at number 2, Jaquelin Roy at an 81.3 grade. Did decent in pass rush, decent in run grade. So at an 81 grade, I'm hoping that we can have another pretty decent interior player, one that we haven't had in a while when it's come to the draft. So
nice. All right, very cool. And look, I know Jordan Hicks is a guy the team's going to identify as, hey, we got to upgrade here, we got to move on, we got to get younger, whatever. But for right now, man, he's helping you hold it together. So kudos to him for standing his ground and playing well. I like it when he does well. Look, I think overall from a PFF standpoint, the optimism there is with the offensive line. Hopefully those guys can keep that going. That's a really positive development for the Minnesota Vikings. On the reverse side, a negative development for the Minnesota Vikings is Justin Jefferson going to IR, Gyles. Going to miss the next 4 games at least. And there's a lot of innuendo out there about a prolonged absence due to unhappiness with his contract, future of the quarterback position, win-loss record, that it could leak into 4 or 5 or more games. So my question to you, I guess, or my jumping off point for this discussion is, we know Jefferson's out for 4 games, but we also are pretty sure he'll be back. In the interim, what?
Honestly, I think you have to further lean into 12 personnel. I mean, you got to lean into your strengths. And although they did not have a great game against the Chiefs, I still believe they're still top-level players in the NFL. TJ Hawkinson and Josh Oliver, you got to lean into that. And hopefully they take this injury and they take it to heart and they say, all right, the team is now on our shoulders? Because I've been dwelling on this over the week. Is there a chance that the Vikings actually get better without Justin Jefferson?
Okay, so that's where I was going to take us here.
Yeah.
Where I was going to take us is there is no doubt that you would rather have Jefferson in the fold.
Yes.
And I'm not going to come off of that position.
He's the best non-quarterback in the league, period,
Okay,
full stop.
so you're better with him on the field.
Yes.
However, as you're trying to recalibrate and redefine yourself, is there a part of this that makes you better? Because it's like, if this thing gets turned around and you're in a position where it's like, hey, if we go 4-0 down the stretch, we have a chance to have a chance. Like, if to get into that position, the Vikings are going to have to stumble onto something or figure something out where they win a bunch of games. Mm-hmm. Okay, so in that scenario, I think it's kind of advantageous that you have to figure it out without Jefferson, because you figure out what is it that's going to be the complement to Jefferson when he comes back. And the only way to find that out is through reps and opportunity. And you are afforded those because you can't throw the ball to Jefferson 12 times a game, right? So I think that's kind of where you were going too.
Absolutely.
And doing that against the Bears is a great way to start.
Yes,
because
it is.
you are talking about the 31st ranked pass defense and the 30th ranked scoring defense. This is a defense that absolutely will give you opportunities to throw against them. Mm-hmm. And so I don't disagree with your 12 personnel take. I do think it's smart to lean into that, but I'd like to see opportunities for some of these fringe wide receivers to see who can step up and be on the field when it comes crunch time when Jefferson's out there. I have a feeling it's KJ and Addison, but maybe it's other people.
Brandon Powell did very well against the Chiefs. He was actually the sixth highest graded player on Sunday.
So let me tell you, that's great data right there. Brandon Powell is not a nobody or a nothing. Also, Brandon Powell played with the Rams when O'Connell was there. Like, he didn't just come here by accident. Like, no. Powell is here on purpose, like right. Akers. Yep. Akers is here on purpose too.
Yes.
So let's meld these two discussions together, Gyles. The Jefferson to IR thing, and then our preview of the Bears. Vikings at Bears, noon Central Time on Sunday from Soldier Field. The game will be on Fox. Vikings installed as 2.5-point favorites currently. The total for this game is 44, which I think is pretty low. Vikings enter 1-4 off a loss to the Chiefs. The Bears enter 1-4 off a Thursday Night Football win over the Commanders. A game in which DJ Moore completely dominated. 8 catches, 230 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Justin Fields had 4 touchdowns. Chicago ran the ball 32 times for 178 yards. Now, the Bears are banged up on both sides of the ball. Starting running back is hurt. 2 corners are hurt, including their nickel. Eddie Jackson is hurt. Their center is hurt. So they're a bit banged up, and their pass defense stinks. I mean, their pass defense is awful. So I think opportunity exists here for the Vikings to figure something out without Justin Jefferson against a weak defense, to gain a momentous win on the road, and to sort of keep their eye on 2023 at Soldier off of a win at Soldier Field. So it's not doom and gloom for me, and the sky's not falling. I see opportunity here for the Vikings at Soldier Field. How about you?
I completely agree. I think across all those spectrums, Brandon Powell has a great addition here. All of our skilled position players outside of Justin Jefferson have a pretty phenomenal opportunity to go set the record straight, literally and figuratively here. Hopefully we can put another win on the board. But I think if you zoom out and look at the Minnesota Vikings and then zoom back in and look at their context against the Bears, there is a lot to like here that we can lean into. According to the 5 weeks that we played football for the Vikings, we're still 8th in yards, right? Now, I think it's important to note that the 2nd place through 8th place, which is us, are very, very similar. The only other team that has more is Miami, and they have about 600 more yards than the 2nd place player, or 2nd place team. So you're doing pretty phenomenal in that regard. Now, you're 15th in points scored as a team, okay? I'm trying to think about how to say this. We're fifth in touchdowns scored. I should just say that. We're 15th in points scored, but we're fifth in touchdowns scored. So
Weird.
obviously there's an interesting paradigm here that's happening, that we are 31st in field goals. We have 4. The Vikings have 4 field goals thus far this season through 5 games. The Eagles have 16. They have literally 4 times as many field goals in the Minnesota Vikings.
Really?
So we're 5th in touchdowns scored. We're 31st in field goals. Now, we've made every single field goal that we've attempted. So just to set the record straight there, it's not that we're attempting and not hitting them. We're simply not attempting field goals. So I think there's an interesting element there. Now, we're 4th in yards per play. We're 10th in first downs. We're 2nd in yards gained per game. We're 1st in passes completed, 1st in pass attempts. We're 2nd in passing yards. We're 1st in receiving touchdowns. Like, we're doing well in a lot of categories. And I don't think these are categories that are just like, oh, you're packaging things together to make the team look good. We're doing very well at producing quality drives. Like, the only area that we haven't done well is in rushing, and we're 28th in rushing yards, but that's partially because the first 2 games we didn't run the ball well. So there's some issues there, obviously, but I think we're on the right trajectory. We are just simply turning the ball over too much. Like, I really think that's the issue. We're first in drives that end in an offensive turnover. 22% of plays result in an offensive turnover. That's an issue.
That's
I think
ridiculous.
That is a stat that absolutely has to change. Like that is a major issue. So if you can fix that, which we've talked about for the first 5 weeks, like a record player here, that will fix your issues. We are a productive team. When you go to PFF and you sort by all the different common categories that offenses care about, we're at least top 5, if not top 10, or top 10, if not top 5 in all those categories. It's just turnovers that are causing an issue. Every other team that you compare us against are all 4-0, 4-1, and we are 1-4. So obviously there's some issues that are going on here that are skewing those results. So I think there's things to like on offense, and I think we can exploit those against the Chicago Bears. When it comes to defense, we are 13th in yards per play allowed at 5.1 yards per play. We are 32nd in pass allowed. So we give up the most passes in the NFL, which is something interesting. I wouldn't have expected that looking into that. We have the fourth most amount of defensive penalties. We give up the 5th most amount of yards via penalty. So that's an issue. We are 1st in the number of blitz plays, period. We have 113 blitz plays so far this season. The second, who do you think is second in number of blitz plays in the NFL? Rough guess.
Chiefs.
Close. They're in the top there. Quick tip or hint. Brian Flores has a connection to him.
Miami.
Not Miami.
With
Good
Vic
call.
Fangio. Oh, yeah. Patriots.
Patriots. They're second.
Yeah.
The Patriots are second, and they have 81. We have 32 more blitz plays than
30
second
more.
place.
Yeah.
So we are blitzing 56.2% of every play. So we're blitzing a lot, which is what we expected with Brian Flores.
We did. Yep.
We are 11th in QB hurries, which I thought it was interesting. We are blitzing a lot, but we're not getting a ton of pressures.
That's bad.
We're still
combo.
It's a bad combo. So that is something to be fixed, because we're blitzing a lot, but if you're not getting QB hurries, it's all for naught. We are 15th in rushing touchdowns allowed, or 28th in receiving touchdowns allowed. So clearly we're doing league average in run defense. But when it comes to receiving, I think our secondary is actually not doing too bad. We're just not getting home. Like, our pressure, in my opinion, is what the issue is, because when you look at our secondary play, a lot of them are actually being productive. It's just the pressure is not happening, right? Where you have the 4th highest red zone touchdown percentage allowed. And we have the most average time per drive allowed on defense. So we are giving teams more time on offense than any other team in the NFL. And that is something that has to change if you want to win the game.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. God, those are really good numbers, Gyles. That's a good self-scout. I mean, that's how, if you can do it to yourself every week, that's great. But when you get into a bye week, those are the types of things you look at. You also look at your play calling tendencies, and you take a look at players who you can replace in the lineup with better or younger players. So those are all really good, insightful numbers, and not just season long, but also as you look at the matchup with the Bears. When I look at just things I would do against the Bears here, offensively, I would throw the ball against them. I would almost just not even really like, oh, we want to go in and establish the run and quiet the crowd. No, we're coming in there. We're going to air it out. You don't think we're going to do it because Justin Jefferson is out, but here we go. It can be out of 12. It can be out of 11, whatever personnel group you want, but I put the ball in the air because I don't think the Bears can guard you.
Mm-hmm.
And then defensively, what worries me is something we talked about last week with the Chiefs. What worries me for the Vikings defense in this game is committing to blitzing or pressuring Fields, not getting home, and then Fields running.
Yep.
So whatever scheme or style of play that will allow defenders' eyes to be on the quarterback, that is what I think you should do. I don't want too high man underneath where guys are trailing receivers with their back to the quarterback and Fields is able to run. That's not what I would do. I want eyes on the quarterback. So one of the things that he can't do to save a play is run. And as long as DJ Moore doesn't have 230 yards and 3 touchdowns against you, I think that the Vikings have a really good chance to win this game.
I agree.
Yeah.
Handily.
Yeah. But I think, Jefferson being out stinks, but it's an opportunity for Kirk to go out there and not have to worry about running the offense through Jefferson. You know what I mean? Yeah.
It potentially opens it up. It makes a much more complex thing for defenses to account for because I don't want to say it's simple to stop Justin Jefferson, but it's a singular point of stoppage, right? How do I stop this player versus, all right, who are they going to throw the ball to? I have no idea how they're going to run this offense with Justin Jefferson out.
Yeah.
So it'll really lean into Kevin O'Connell's level of creativity. What can he do to utilize all these players that have actually a tremendous amount of talent?
Yep. Yeah. So when I look at this game, I see. I mentioned the Vikings are 4.5-point favorites and the total's 44. I see the Vikings winning and covering, and I see the game going over. So I'm sitting there at 30-17, 28-17, 28-20, 30-20. I'm seeing something like that. And if anything, I see the Bears not getting to 17. Maybe it's 14 or 10 or something like that. And laugh at me if you want if we're talking about a 1-5 team a week from now. But we're going to talk after you give your prediction, Gyles. We're going to talk about, the tank or not tank discussion.
Yep.
If I'm wrong on this and they lose the game, I'm going to be on the other side of the fence of the argument I'm going to make in a minute.
Yep.
But I think the Vikings can win this game. I think they will win the game, and I think it sets up a very significant stretch of games coming up with San Francisco, Green Bay, and Atlanta coming up in the next month.
Yep. I am on the same wavelength here. I'm predicting a 17-31 win for the Minnesota Vikings. I think that's what's going to happen. I also think that's what's required if you expect to move forward as a team this season, because your Justin Jefferson is out. You need to prove that you can actually move the ball without him, because realistically, this could be 6 to 8 weeks before Justin Jefferson is back. I mean, that could be shortened if he can really rehab well, but those hamstrings can really linger on. So I'm going to operate with the belief that he'll be out 6 to 8 weeks. So you need to be able to be prepared to how to win games without him. And if you expect to go toe to toe with the other real big dogs in the league, you need to go put up 31 on the Bears. Period. You have to do it. So I'm predicting a 17-31 win.
All right, so you're at 48 total points, so you would be playing the over as well, and you take the Vikings to cover. I am in the same boat. We will see what happens, of course. We'll talk about it next week on that edition of the Wobcast 2.0 when we break down the Vikings-Bears game and we look ahead to a very tough opponent in the San Francisco 49ers, who will come to U.S. Bank Stadium next week in Week 7. Before we go, though, I think number one talker in Vikings Nation, Gyles, is to tank or not to tank. I think those who have been listening to the whole episode know where we're going to stand on this. I do believe that when it's over, when you're out, be out. Get out, be out. Yep. Don't let quote-unquote meaningless wins in a season hurt your chances for next season, whether it comes to draft position or playing young players to develop them, all that sort of thing. I'm not I'm not one of those who's like, you have to win every game at all costs, no matter what. It's good for the culture. You know what? Sometimes it makes some sense to not lose on purpose, but to play young players for development, try new things, hand play calling duties to a less experienced coach, all that. Mm-hmm. I don't think the Vikings are there right now, Gyles. I take a look at what's ahead, and I do believe they'll lose to San Francisco next week. But after that, it's at Green Bay, at Atlanta, home to New Orleans, at Denver, home to Chicago, bye week. And then it's Raiders. You know, like I said,
rattle off some wins.
You can. And some may be detractors out there, and they'll say they don't think it will happen, but it's possible that it will happen. And because of that, I think you got to stick with it in 2023 still, even looking at 1-4 in the face.
Yep, I completely agree. When you look at all the different categories that most teams measure success off of, we are doing well. Now, clearly, we haven't figured out how to not fumble the ball, so that obviously is part of the equation. But when you remove that from it, we are a elite offense in pretty much every category. And we are league average in most categories for defense. And if you would have gone into this season asking for those two things, you would have said, let's do it. Right now, if you were to kind of fast forward to the end of the season and say, hey, you lost 7 games, which is not as many as I would love, but let's say even 6 or 7 games, whatever, you'd say, all right, not as many as I'd love, but we can work with that. We got them all at the same time, right? So if we can really click this together and let Justin Jefferson's IR status power our motivation to go show other teams that we're more than Justin Jefferson. He's a phenomenal player, and we always want him on the field, but we're not Justin Jefferson. Just as a team, we have a lot of other amazing weapons. If we can properly motivate ourselves, I think there's a real powerhouse lying in wait. Now, I also agree we're going to lose to the 49ers. I think they're the most complete team in the NFL, but I think we can absolutely rattle off some wins to get back to neutral. And like you mentioned, November is the time that the NFL starts, really. And I think there's a chance that we can get back to somewhat even by then and then go on a run because I think we have all the right pieces to be dominant. We really, really do. Now, obviously, they have to go do that, but I really do believe that they could turn this ship around.
Yep. I think they can too. Mathematically, I know they can, but just from what I'm watching, I can I would hold out hope for it still. I wouldn't wave the white flag and start benching people and trade Cousins and all this stuff. I just don't think you're there. I think at 1-5 and a loss to the Bears, then I think you are there. Mm-hmm. But that's not where you are, and I think they're going to be 2-4.
Agreed. Yep.
Completely and agreed. The Lions are 4-1, and that's who you have to look at first. And you have to keep in mind that you play them twice in the final 3 weeks. So if you are within 3 games with 3 weeks to go, you're literally in it to win it.
Yep. You're in control of your destiny.
Yeah. So, That's where I think they sit. I hope that at this time next week we're talking about ways I hope the question is, Gyles, can you formulate a path to victory against the Niners? That's what I hope the discussion is. Because if they lose to the Bears, that's not what the discussion is. We're going to preview the Niners for 2 minutes. And then after that, we're going to start talking about who can we play that's young to help them develop and be a part of the team next year, right?
Yep.
So anyway, that's sort of where I think things are going. Any notes, thoughts, opinions that we didn't get to throughout the duration of the show for you?
I think the last thing would be the difference of what we think Vikings should do and what they will actually do as just a general Vikings fan base. I know a lot of people wearing purple today that are like, all right, blow it up. There's no chance we can get back from this. Yeah. We should trade Kirk Cousins. We should trade Danielle Hunter. And whether we should or we shouldn't, I can definitely argue that. And we just provided our thoughts on the team as a general. I don't think the Vikings are a team that will ever condone blowing it up. They are like the New York Giants, or they're like the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are always in it to win it. They always want to be competitive. Yeah. And at the end of the day, you also have Brian Flores as a defensive coordinator who is in an active NFL lawsuit against a team for tanking. So I don't ever foresee the Vikings actively pursuing that category. So I think the moment Vikings fans realize, all right, they're never going to do that. Let's get back to realistic solutions on how we can win, not speculate on, they could do this. That's a pipe dream at this point.
Agreed. Especially right now at 1-4,
yes.
They're not going to do it. If they beat the Bears and then they lose to the Niners, they're still not going to do it. Mm-hmm. So Yeah.
Things would have to get pretty bad for that to ever be a realistic possibility.
Yep, agreed. And the trade deadline is Halloween, I think. We looked that up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, 4 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, so, if you truly are like basically like if they have one win and it's close to the trade deadline, then I think you got to have some hard conversations and think about how you do this, but you do it competitively, you do it with integrity, you do right by the people who are invested, and that includes fans. But let's cross that bridge when we get there. There's a few games to go before that, and a couple of them I think the Vikings will win. One of them we know they're favored in, and that's this one. Depending on what happens over the next 2 weeks, there's a chance the Vikings go to Atlanta as a favorite. Now, right now, they'd be an underdog, but we'll see what happens. So a lot to see before you can endorse a tanking philosophy. I don't think you're there quite yet. Others have differing opinions, and that's what makes the whole thing fun, right? Fun to talk about. So, yeah.
This is true.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Wobcast 2.0. Gyles and I both see a victory, and I think the other takeaway from this episode, and I'll give you the last word on it, is the improvement of that offensive line, particularly the interior. That is the silver lining for the purple right now, Gyles.
Could not agree more. My boy Ed there at right guard, what a stud. I am so proud of him for stepping up, because that is a deal breaker in the right way to winning this season. I think had he had another poor game, he would have not necessarily been right guard anymore. And the fact that he's there really shows some really exciting things yet to come for this season.
Awesome. And before, I'd be remiss not to say this too before we go. Congrats again to KLC. Hope you guys have had a really fun week. And you have an event this weekend too, right? Do you not?
Not this weekend. Tomorrow we end the day with Bring Your Pet to Work Day. This morning we had Omelet Day. We brought in a personal chef that made custom omelets for everyone.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was quite
good
phenomenal.
For you guys.
So it's a good day to be in equipment finance.
Awesome. Good for you guys, man. Happy for you. That's awesome to hear. All right, everyone. That's going to do it for this episode of the Wobcast 2.0. We thank you for listening, and we encourage you to like, follow, and subscribe to the Wobcast 2.0 so you can hear and watch all future episodes and join the conversation with myself and with Gyles. You can do that wherever you find all your other favorite football content and podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and of course, we're also on YouTube. So on behalf of Gyles, this is Wobby signing off for now. Good luck to the Vikings at Soldier Field, hoping for a victory and some more positive discussion a week from now. Until next time, Skol Vikings.